Welcome back, San Antonio Spurs fans. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of pounding the rock trade talk with a very special guest. We've got Keith Smith, writer and reporter for Yahoo Sports, among other outlets. He is also the originator of the Disney NBA bubble idea. How are you doing today, Keith?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to get into this with you. I rarely get to talk Spurs, so I'm pretty psyched.
I'm excited too. I wasn't sure, when I reached out to you, if you were going to be super booked, because I know you've been kind of busy. Especially with that idea and the whole bubble ending up working out. So again, I'm just so excited. I appreciate you for being here. I know most Spurs fans and most NBA fans know who you are, but why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about your background, how you got started in writing about the NBA, and then we'll kind of hop into today's topic.
Sure, yeah. I worked for Disney for almost 2 decades. I started with them when I was an intern in college, and then went home, finished school. Home is Massachusetts for me. Although I've been here in Orlando for almost as long as I lived in Mass now, minus a brief stop in California. I came back to Disney, went full time with them. The company moved my wife and I to California. They moved us back to Florida. Kind of my tent poles were always around the NBA. Though when I first moved here, it was the Celtics were making a run in the playoffs, and that kind of kept me connected to home. When I lived in California, it's when they traded for Kevin Garnett, so I was surrounded in Lakerland, in Southern California there, and then from there it was really I was I didn't have a lot of friends who were big NBA fans, a lot of football fans and things like that, but not a lot of people who were big NBA fans. And I found the different communities online to chat about the NBA on a regular basis. And I started writing these really long forum posts about the salary cap and those kind of things and all that. And then that came into an opportunity to write for realgm.com. And that's where it started kind of my writing journey. From there, that grew into an opportunity with Celtics Blog with SB Nation. So since then, I've worked for Yahoo, continue to write for Yahoo. And then I also do stuff or worked for NBC Sports for a while, doing things Slam as well for their online component of Slam Magazine. So yeah, a lot of different things, but yeah, I love the league. I love all of it, and there's nothing about it that I don't like. Thing I like the most though was the roster construction, the salary cap, and the CBA.
And that's definitely kind of a more difficult concept to grasp. But for people who aren't like familiar with, the intricacies of the cap details and the rules that go behind trading and signing and all those sorts of things with the players. But you especially are like one of the more inspirational stories to me for writers who are able to just grind, put their head down, have just a great work ethic, and slowly but surely get to where you want to go. And I'm kind of in that same boat. I want to work my way there. I've got a small time writing gig that started out with a smaller side, and I worked my way up a little bit, and I'm still trying to work my way up. So again, I'm so happy for you to join me here. And let's just get right into the trade talk. So you wrote an article for Celtics Blog on SB Nation. And one of the trades that caught my eye immediately was obviously the LaMarcus Aldridge and Rudy Gay deal. So in this deal, you have Gordon Hayward, Robert Williams, and the 26th pick heading to the Spurs, and LaMarcus Aldridge and Rudy Gay are headed to the Celtics. Now, for me, I like this trade for the Spurs because it gets Aldridge and Gay off the books. Not that it's that important since there's only 1 year left on their deal,
Yeah.
but it opens up playing time for a lot of the young guys potentially. And I think that really helps the Spurs. They get, the 26th pick back. That's just another young asset. And we know the Spurs have been very good at developing talent over the year. And Gordon Hayward is on an expiring deal as well. He's somebody who is going to be a rental. If they like him, maybe they bring him back. And Robert Williams is a great asset for me, at least in my eyes. I see him as somebody who can be, a rim running big, who has some defensive playmaking potential. So I think there's definitely interest if I were the Spurs in these guys and offloading LaMarcus and Rudy. But how do you think this trade benefits Boston? And could you see the Celtics, going forward with this sort of deal?
Yeah, so I want to preface it with any trades are highly unlikely. Their trades are always more likely to not happen than they are to happen. I also think any Gordon Hayward trade is very unlikely, especially any trade that involves draft picks, because he's probably not going to have to opt in or out of his deal until after the draft. So that just makes it very confusing. So, but the challenge with writing a trade idea piece without using Gordon Hayward for the Celtics is you're going to end up with a whole bunch of boring trades like
Sure.
Vincent Poirier and Carson Edwards and a pick to dump salary, which, that's probably more likely to happen, but that's not very fun, right? In the ideas you want to, stimulate the mind a little bit, involve the reader. So I think for the Celtics side, the kind of going assumption has been a big that has experience, that can score the ball some, can do some different things, rebound, and that's LaMarcus Aldridge. And then they've had such a problem with bench production that I think Rudy Gay could fit in nicely there behind them. I would assume this type of deal would push, maybe someone like Daniel Tice to the bench. So he kind of becomes Aldridge's backup. And I think Aldridge at this point in his career, he's maybe probably going to max out about 28 minutes a game, those kind of things. So Tice, still plenty of playing time for him, 20 minutes a night. They probably spot Aldridge some rest days. Gay becomes, like I said, that productive bench scorer. And then, one of the things I always do whenever I start talking about trades is, but what's in it for the other side too? And for the Spurs, you kind of hit on it, right? They clear the money off the books. You take on Hayward, who's about equal money for Gay and Aldridge by himself, but he is also an expiring deal. So you're really going to go into next summer with just about max cap space, but it's about getting that first round pick and getting Robert Williams, who is a talented young big man who's been just a little bit blocked in Boston to this point. And I think that pathway to playing time is a little bit easier in San Antonio because it'd be kind of him and Jakob Pertl and not a whole lot else that's, really true NBA rotation level talent at the big man spots. So I think, he would be a interesting guy for them to have. And then another first round pick is, as I get the sense, the Spurs have kind of turned the corner after, 2+ decades of, playoff run and in dominance. And, by no means would I be surprised if they were right back in the playoffs again next year. I think they've got enough talent to do that, but I just get the sense they're kind of turning the corner a little bit into, their next iteration, and kind of maybe this might be a, couple year rebuild down cycle as they, put things back together asset wise around some of the younger players and then push forward in another year or two. So that's kind of where that trade grew out of.
Sure. And, and another thing that I really like about them getting Robert Williams back in that scenario is, Pirtle is a restricted free agent this offseason. Mm-hmm. So the Spurs could match any offer sheet that he signs. But the question is, how much do they value him? If it goes over, 10, 12 million. And I saw somewhere in a podcast with Zach Lowe I was listening to that he was thinking he's about $8 to $10 million player. If it goes over that amount, do they care to retain him? I don't know. So if he walks or, walks per se, if he's signed away, I think that's a great insurance policy there. And you're right. They don't have a lot of front court depth. It's pretty thin there. And even in losing LaMarcus Aldridge, in a sense, by trading him you would lose some of that depth. So I do like getting that piece back. Now, I did want to propose something. I kind of altered the trade a little bit. So I put Gordon Hayward, and instead of Robert Williams, I put Grant Williams in the 14th pick for LaMarcus Aldridge and Rudy Gay. And the only reason I like that deal a little bit more is because they're going to completely open up that big man spot. They can draft some big men if they want, maybe with the 14th pick, and then they can draft somebody who they think is maybe more ready to contribute. Because of how I see it in this draft class, I do a lot of scouting pieces for Pounding the Rock, is most of the big men who are going to be available in that range are probably going to be projects. So I think it would be nice to have someone who, is going to be an immediate contributor, and then maybe a project big man, kind of like they did with Luka Šamanić last year's draft. So is that a trade, do you think, that would interest Boston possibly? And I know you may not know, from them directly, but just off the top of your mind, is that something that you think would be fair for Boston?
I think the 14th pick is where that starts to tilt a little too towards San Antonio for the Celtics liking, because I think they'd be looking at it as, but really when it comes down to it, it's Hayward for Aldridge, and then it becomes Gay for either of the Williams and a pick. So that's kind of how you balance that out a little bit, I think. And I totally understand if Spurs fans are like, no, we don't want Hayward for Aldridge. That makes sense to me, right? I fully get that. I understand that. And I think the challenge for the Celtics is, if you have Aldridge and you have Tice, and then you've got, assuming they could bring back somebody like Taco Fall
Mhm.
there, or you could bring back, you could go sign a veteran big man, in free agency. And then you need someone who can be more of a four who can play the five, which is Grant Williams, versus Robert Williams is a five who can play a little bit at the four. So I think that starts to, it muddies the water a little too much at the big man rotation. That was an issue this year. You had Tice, Cantor, and Williams. Now injuries took care of Williams being out, Robert Williams, that is, being out for large chunks of the season and those kind of things. Cantor was also, there was a period where he just wasn't really part of the rotation. So that I think ultimately, as it comes down to it, that becomes a, yeah, we gotta, look at the best way to construct an overall roster. So I don't know that would be as interesting for Boston. Now maybe if you switched it back to the 26th pick or something like that, maybe that gets a little more interesting, because I think they could look at it and say, well, we can get somebody who can replace Grant Williams minutes. We'd have Rudy Gay there, well, whatever the case is. But I think Grant Williams is kind of an important piece for the Celtics. Also, he's got an additional year on his rookie scale contract versus Robert Williams, and that's important for Boston too, because they're getting to be an increasingly expensive top end roster with guys like Kemba Walker, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum will have an extension
Sure.
kick in after next season. So I think, retaining guys on those rookie scale deals as long as they can, that's important too.
Sure. And, initially when I was looking at the deals, I was thinking, well, LaMarcus Aldridge may be the most valuable player in this deal. But then I took a second and I went, well, actually, he just had, shoulder surgery.
Yep.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, it feels like the bubble was forever ago now that there's no basketball to watch, but it wasn't
It
that
was
long
only
ago.
3 months ago. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I'm thinking, do the Celtics maybe value LaMarcus that much? Is it going to take more if they were wanting to get Gordon Hayward? Because I know that some Spurs fans are actually pretty on board with that deal. They like it because it gets rid of LaMarcus. And one of the reasons I think Spurs fans are so ready to move on from LaMarcus as opposed to DeMar DeRozan, and that scenario was switched completely last year. But the reason that they're so ready to move on from him is because we saw these young Spurs play at a very high pace in the bubble. If I believe correctly, the second highest pace in the bubble. Yeah. And LaMarcus Aldridge is sort of a ball stopper. He's somebody who still needs all those post touches. And yes, he did stretch his game out a bit beyond the 3-point line. He made a career high 3-pointers this year. And he shot a pretty good percent as well. But that is still, I don't think, a large enough part of his game. And he still needs the ball to stay engaged. He's somebody who very much needs his touches to stay engaged on both ends. I think that's why they would be more willing to get rid of LaMarcus and they would want to bring Gordon Hayward. But again, I'm not sure what LaMarcus's value is at this point, because he is aging. He is somebody who had kind of even though he had sort of a remaking of his game, he kind of had a down year a little bit statistically. So I kind of wonder about his trade value.
Yeah, that's why I don't put a super high, value on him, because we don't know how is he going to come back. Is he now in that phase of his career where he's going to miss, 20, 30, 40 games a season? Or, that tends to kind of happen, to a lot of guys as they go. Is he okay with going to a place where he's clearly going to be probably fourth in the pecking order? Or is it, I need all these touches. I need to, see the ball a lot and those kind of things. This slower pace, I don't think is an issue for Boston, like it could be for San Antonio. I don't think the Celtics, they play quick, but they don't play super fast. And I think the Spurs, really one of my favorite things of the bubble was they found with those kind of funky 4-guard lineups. I likened it to an NCAA tournament team, a mid-major, whereas one true big and then a bunch of, smalls around them, and they're kind of overflowing with good guards, between Murray and White and Walker. And then you've got Keldon Johnson, who I like quite a bit. Those guys I think all need to play. And then, assuming, Bryn Forbes, maybe he's back, maybe he's not, but Patty Mills, you've just got, kind of guards coming out their years. And I think, that would be, fun to see what they could do with that kind of over the course of a full season. I also think, kind of looking forward to this next year, I think it's going to be a compressed season where we're probably going to see some more back-to-backs come in play. So maybe some more of the 4 and 5 nights that they've gotten rid of as they try to kind of retighten up the calendar, get back on a normal schedule. I think you could see a team like San Antonio really lean into, we're going a youth movement here and we're really going to push. One thing, but while we're kind of on the subject, I messed around a lot with, because there's a guy Celtics fans ask about a lot, is Rudy Gobert. right?
Okay, yeah.
That's the guy that, we'd love to have him. But clearly, Hayward for Gobert is not going to happen, right? Gordon Hayward is not going to opt in and then get traded back to Utah. There's,
Yeah.
any host of reasons that's not going to happen. So one of the things that I tossed around was the Spurs kind of working in there as the third team, where Aldridge goes to Utah, kind of becomes their new, their new big. Theirs they transition Gobert to Boston, Hayward to San Antonio. You'd have to move some other pieces around, and that was something that I thought, maybe there could be something there. I avoid 3-team trades, kind of like I avoid, the that's probably not funny to say now, but the plague,
Yeah.
with everything that's going on in the world. But yeah, I avoid them like that because, it's hard enough to find a 2-team trade that actually makes sense and works.
Mhm.
Once you add that third team in there, that's one more team now you got to satisfy. So, that's something else that kind of floated around in my head. But yeah, I don't, I just don't know, other ways to make a match. But yeah, I do get the sense that the Spurs might be ready to, covering the team. Not much gets out of San Antonio. You don't hear
Yeah.
a ton of rumors and those kind of things, but just kind of the way everything led up to the restart. And then since then, everybody's kind of had a little bit of a sense of, San Antonio might be looking to do something a little bit different this coming year, just with it being a very different season and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it certainly feels like they could make this sort of youth movement, because it did, like we discussed, it did work fairly well in the bubble. And I will say there is some doubt in my mind just because they did play a lot of teams that were sitting starters or star
Yeah.
players on the way. But I still think they played a really good brand of basketball. They were effective. They kept the ball moving. And
Really
Jakob, I
fun.
think, was really excellent in also keeping the ball moving. I think he's very
Yeah.
underrated as a passer. Now, he's not like a Nikola Jokic or a Bam Adebayo kind of passer as a big man, but he's certainly capable in that area. So I would like
Yeah, I
to.
think he's really, sorry to interrupt you. I think he's
Okay.
really good at, taking the ball off the boards, and getting it right out to a guard to get it up the
Yeah.
floor, or take a couple dribbles and then get a pass up the floor. I think his defense is, clearly better than Aldridge's at this point. So I think you can get away with playing a little smaller around him because he can kind of clean things up a little bit more on the backside. That's where another thing I think where a guy like Robert Williams will be really good because he's an excellent shot blocker.
Mhm.
So I think you could play those kind of smaller lineups, gamble a little bit on the perimeter. It's just, it's tough because as much as I liked it, I have 20 years of history of the Spurs play a certain way, and it kind of gets ingrained in there, right? And you're like, man, this, small group, like was that just a necessity thing? And we did it, there. But
Yeah.
I also part of me wonders, if Pop's like, hey, I only got a few more years left of doing this, and I want to try some different stuff. I want to play a little differently. Is that, something that could be happening too? It's funny. And I think, they were ahead of the league a lot with the pace and space stuff
Mhm.
early on. I think people think of them as a very slow team, but they played pretty quick for a few years there. It was about getting it up the floor and,
Yeah.
finding shots early on and those kind of things. And I think, I wonder if they're a little ahead of like, hey, we're going to play with a whole bunch of ball handlers and playmakers, and we'll play just big enough to be able to hold our own in the glass. They're also Murray and White are great rebounders at the guard position, so that
Uh-huh.
helps you there. So yeah, I do wonder, if that's where they're going. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting. That's why I think very much, Aldridge trades are in play. And then Rudy Gay, just by virtue of still a productive player, expiring contract that's, sort of good size, and very tradable. I think he's going to be in the mix there as well.
Yeah, I think so too. And one of the only reasons that I kind of am scared that they may not do this is because heading into the year, we heard a lot of buzz about DeJounte Murray looking excellent, just so quick, and he was getting down the floor, he was scoring well, in like, workouts and in different videos and even in preseason. And then we also heard a lot of buzz about Lonnie Walker. And then when it came to the season, Lonnie Walker took a very big backseat to Bryn Forbes
Yeah.
and Marco Bellinelli, two guys who shot pretty much about 40% to 37% from the floor all year long, and their defense was so atrocious. It just was not on brand for the Spurs. But time and
Yep.
time again, we saw Lonnie yanked. We saw Keldon in the G League pretty much all year, and he was a guy who, I've mentioned this in the past, I didn't really think he needed a lot of G League minutes. I was kind of confused why he slid down the draft. He seemed like a pretty easy plug and play player, but I think it actually benefited him being there. He got a chance to be a
Yeah.
number one option, develop a little bit. And even though he didn't shoot well in the G League, I think it was about 27% from three on 2.5 attempts. He shot exceptionally well in the bubble. And I don't think that
Yep.
he's going to shoot 60% next year from three. That's just not going to happen.
Probably not.
That 35, 38% range would be nice. And he's someone who doesn't
Yeah.
need the ball. So I'm excited to see what the Spurs do next season, because I think
And
if they do buy into that youth movement, it could be something worth monitoring.
And I think for Johnson, his what he got most out of that G League time that he logged was his off the dribble game got better. I think he's off the dribble. He can work a little bit now as a pick and roll ball handler, which he didn't really have before in his game too much. A lot of the Kentucky guards come out and they don't really have that, especially the bigger ones, the wing type guys that weren't point guards. They're a lot more cuts and play off the ball and spot up as shooters and those kind of things. I'm not worried about him as a shooter. Like you said, he's not going to shoot, the lights out like he did in the bubble, but, I think he'll settle in. His history tells us he's going to be a pretty good shooter. I think it was just a matter of, you had, Murray and White is the point guards, but they played a lot together too. So one of them had to play off the ball, and then Walker's in front of him, DeRozan's in front of him, Bellinelli, Mills, Forbes. It's like, at some point he's like the seventh guard, in the rotation. And it's like, all right, I'd rather send him down to the G League, let him play, and then, he can be back up with us for practices, which I know the Spurs, because the G League team's pretty close. They got pretty good at that shuttle there. If you're going to go down and play, but then you'll come back up and you'll practice with us and those kind of things. And I think, that paid off. It said a lot to me that even under the circumstances of guys being out and all that Pop trusted him enough to really make him a rotation player in the bubble. And I think they used the bubble for exactly what they should have, was let's see what we got in some of these guys, and, there was a point where I want to say it was with maybe 3-4 days left. I was like, holy crap, they're going to, force their way into this play-in, and then they're going to, get in the playoffs again. Like, it really looked like that might, actually happen. And that was, that was kind of fun, but yeah, I think they used it. Let's experiment. Let's get these young guys, some minutes. We know what some of these other guys can do. There's not a whole lot of reason to continue to play them. And I thought that's, what they did. And I thought they made the absolute most of it, because that's what you should have done.
Exactly. They did a great job of just what you said. They saw what they had in these young guys. They got an idea of how they might work together. And I actually, before the bubble, DeJounte and Derek only played about 100 minutes together. But in the bubble, they played a ton together. I think they did a great job of securing the perimeter alongside of Lonnie Walker and Keldon Johnson. I think that's a pretty interesting defensive versatility defensive wise, group. That group is very versatile on the perimeter. I like what they bring to the table. So I'm excited to see, what they can do. And I think if anything, I did say I have some doubts, but we saw Bryn Forbes was sitting all of the bubble. We also saw Patty Mills sit all but one game. So I kind of think Pop may have, a light may have come on for him and gone, I've been maybe a little stubborn this year. I've tried to push this, veteran-led playoff push. Didn't really work. Let's see what we have in the young guys. And I hope that continues into next season. But that's pretty much all I have for the trade talk and, talking about the Spurs. But I did want to ask you about the NBA bubble, because
let's do it
for obvious reasons. So my first question was, when, where, and how did you come up with this idea for this Disney bubble? I know you mentioned you work for Disney. Did that play into it at all?
Yeah, big time. So when the season shut down, right, we're all like, it's going to be 2 weeks. We'll be back at it, and then, we're now at the end of October, and I've left my house like 20 times, to go to the store and those kind of things. Maybe a few more than that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're all still, doing our thing, or hopefully are, or should be, or whatever, but that's a whole different kind of podcast and show. So then it was, all right, so the season's not going to restart. And then you started getting all the crazy ideas. Like, let's go to a private island, and we'll build a court. And I was like, one court? Like, that's not enough. Anybody who, covers the NBA knows, like, they play on one court, and then there's practice courts and practice courts and practice courts and all sorts of other stuff. And then the other big thing is, we heard, go play on cruise ships. Well, I've been on cruises, and all I could envision was, oh, he's up for the game-winning shot. Oh, big wave, and it's off the rim because the boat moved. Like, I mean, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's
and there's nowhere. Yeah, and there's no room on a cruise ship for a full court basketball court. It just wasn't going to happen. People think about the college game that they play on the aircraft carrier every year. Well, the aircraft carrier deck is a hell of a lot different than a cruise ship, right?
Yes.
With that. So that becomes like a whole thing. So I was like, that's nuts. And then you started hearing the more reasonable things like Las Vegas because they play summer league there? What about going to Atlantic City or into the Bahamas or something like that? And the more I thought about it, I've been to summer league, I want to say 9, 10 years in a row now, something like that, up until this past year. Started going just as a fan and then started going for, work purposes several years ago. And I love it as a venue for summer league, but anybody who's been there knows it's hosted on UNLV's campus, which is just kind of in the middle of like city. So I looked at it and I'm like, how are you going to close it down and keep people away from where they need to be? And but yeah, there's all the hotels in Vegas that are sitting empty at the time, and so the players can stay in there, but then you got to get them from the hotel all the way to the thing. And I said, Disney has the Wide World of Sports complex, has 3 arenas. They've got, all this, hotel space, tons and tons of it. And it's a private property. If they need to shut down and, coordinate off with security, they'll do that. In like the sports complex, you can get near that place. I drove by it a couple times and you couldn't, there's about probably a 1/4 mile driveway down into it. Where the arenas are, and you right from the the connecting street. You couldn't even get in there. So they had, all kinds of security there, all kinds of security at the hotels and all those things. So I went to my editor at Yahoo and I said, hey, so I got kind of this idea. Thankfully, he knows the Disney property quite well also. And he was like, yeah, write it up and we'll see what happens. And we wrote it up and went, we posted it and kind of said, well, it'll be kind of a fun article to get out there. Who knows if we'll ever hear anything, about it or not, or if it'll ever go anywhere. But, it's just another proposal to get out there. And then, clearly it went a little bit crazy from there.
Yeah, and that's actually something that I was interested in. So like you mentioned, you wrote this idea and it came to life for Yahoo Sports. What was the initial feedback like? Was it quick? Because I ended up reading it later. I didn't read it immediately, but was it quick or was it something that kind of built momentum after time?
Yeah, it was pretty quick. Thankfully Yahoo's a pretty big outlet, and they actually ended up putting it on yahoo.com too. So instead of just Yahoo Sports, so that, there's a whole like yahoo.com might be like my mom and sister audience versus I don't know that they ever go to Yahoo Sports unless I'm like, hey, I have a thing there, read it.
Yeah.
So that it ends up, picking up a whole different group of people. But what I can say too is, right, so you've got you've got that. So what happened was it went up. I actually believe I tagged in one of the initial tweets with something like, before you laugh, don't, give this a read. And, of course, there were a lot of people like, I'm not clicking on that. That's stupid. It should be Las Vegas. There was a lot of feedback, which was very fair at the time of like, you really want people to go to Florida and play?
Yeah.
Like, what are you, insane? There were just some people who were like, they shouldn't be playing at all. Like, this is crazy. But then as that first day kind of went along, there were a lot of people who reached out and like, I read that and like, I didn't realize Disney had all that, which is totally fair. Because if you think about it, when you come here on vacation, have you ever been to Walt Disney World?
I have, yeah, but as a child,
Okay.
so I don't have a lot of memories, but I do know of it, yeah.
But so you come, right? You drop your bags in your hotel, you run around theme parks, you leave at the end of a week exhausted and poor, right? Like that's, that's generally the idea, right? People don't, the only people I found throughout this process that really knew about the sports complex prior to the NBA being there were people who played AAU basketball or, high level club soccer or volleyball and those kind of things because they had been there. Everybody else was like, I never even knew this existed.
I had no idea it was there.
Yeah. It's not something you would go to just as an average guest, right? There's not a reason to go there. So it was, so as the day went along, people were like, yeah, maybe this could work, like Disney could be there. We, and it was kind of neat to kind of watch it from there. You'll kind of go. And then after that, it went away for probably about 2-3 weeks or so, in that range, probably about 2. And then I believe it was Shams Charania of The Athletic tweeted like the NBA seriously looking. And one of the options is Walt Disney World. And that gave it a whole new life because then people, started like, hey, I saw this article at Yahoo and stuff. And it was funny because a few people sent it to me and like, hey, I saw this thing. I think you live in Orlando. Do you know anything about this? And I was like, yeah, I wrote it. So it was just kind of funny. And then it went away again for another couple of weeks. And then by the end of May or so, it was like, this is happening. For me, I can just tell you a little peek behind the curtain, inside baseball, if you will. I knew from the Disney side that it was happening, but I could not get a source on the NBA side to confirm that it was happening. So, in our business, you generally don't run unless you have it, really well confirmed. And the last thing we want to do is run something and have a bunch of people come back and be like, you're insane, like, no, and all this stuff. And then if it doesn't happen, you get it wrong once is worse than getting it right 100 times.
Sure, you don't necessarily want to be the first person to get it out. You want to be the first person to get it right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Accuracy over speed every single time. So it was, so at that point I was like, all right, well, we can't run it. Then once it was getting a little more traction, it was coming out, we're all right, let's run with it. Yeah, let's get it out there. And that was kind of when I had a string of stuff there, and I was like, I am empty in the bag, if you will. I've got all this stuff that I'm going to put out there that I've heard about, everything under the sun to do with Disney coming, or the NBA coming here to Walt Disney World, and Disney taking care of them and all that stuff. So yeah, it was a roller coaster, if you will, of ups and downs and all sorts of stuff, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think that's it was really amazing to see how that really just ended up coming together. And I'm glad that I know now that the process of that's actually pretty cool. And I think I read an article where I believe the league reached out to you, and if I'm wrong, you can tell me. But what did they say, and have they acknowledged you since that initial contact, or?
The afternoon the article posted, I got an email from someone within the NBA, not from a team, but someone with the NBA itself. And what they said was, thank you for a thoughtful and thorough idea. And that was literally the extent of it. There was nothing beyond that said. And that was it. And nothing since then. And there's a lot of people who will ask, especially more those who are like personal friends are like, man, that must make you angry, are you bitter? And I'm like, we got basketball back, and
sure,
it was awesome, and the season finished and all those things. So I'm not bitter about it at all. I would much like everybody, I would super hopeful that would lead somewhere professionally for me, because unfortunately a couple of outlets I write for, I was furloughed, like so many people in the media were, when things shut down and slowed down so much sports wise. But that is what it is. Better days to come, brighter days ahead. We'll be okay. But yeah, it was it was cool to just get that initial note, and that was but that really was, that was the extent of it. Nothing since I believe it was April 16th that posted. So, here we sit, 6 months later, that the season finished off, and, or so. And it was, it was just really cool that they were able to make it happen and finish it out.
And it must have been like amazing just to get that note and acknowledge. Because if I was in your position, just getting that acknowledgement, even if it's just a little bit at the very beginning there, that would have been enough for me. But you actually got to see your idea become a reality. So how did it feel just seeing this idea that you had end up becoming a real thing? Like, it ended up happening, and they executed it pretty much as closely to perfection as you could. They thousands of tests, hundreds of games, 0 positive results. They finished the postseason, and it was a very competitive bubble, from just the seeding game to the playoffs, even the finals. I know that some people were a little bit upset about, there's some injuries here and there, but I thought overall it was a pretty competitive series and a competitive bubble in general.
Yeah, basketball wise, felt awesome, right? Because basketball was back, so it was really cool to be able to see the season finish, and just all the fun that went along with that. Really enjoyed that part of it. The part that I really liked was Disney wise. As much as I left Disney, I actually left Disney 3 weeks before the season shut down. Because I had put together enough basketball work that I could do basketball full time, which had been the dream for a long time. And I, it was tough to leave. I loved Disney. I loved working there. I'd go, back and work there again, in a heartbeat if the opportunity came. But I wanted to do something different with my career. I wanted to chase this basketball dream. So from that perspective, there was an enormous sense of pride I had a lot of friends who, a lot of friends who still work for the company. A lot of family, quite frankly, that works for the company as well. And then a lot of people who work directly with the NBA as far as taking care of them while they were here at Walt Disney World. So that part of it was I knew Disney could do it. I worked there for 20 years. I know how well they take care of people. I know how well Disney takes care of people when it's adverse circumstances like a hurricane and things
Sure.
like that. I know what Disney can do. So I knew it could happen. But then, when you would see the tweets or you would hear the comments of like, wow, man, they really take care of people and this is so cool and all those things. There's just an enormous sense of pride there for my friends, the people I've spent the better part of my career working alongside, that they did such a great job. So that part of it was just nothing will top that part of the entire experience, was seeing them really get their kudos for what they were able to do.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Russell Westbrook. He was so moved by like how well they took care of him. He left an enormous tip. They said he left the room spotless. And I know a lot of other players felt the exact same way. I got a chance to look at some of the videos, the behind the scenes of like how they do the dinners, how they do the sanitations, how they do the, the testing there for, COVID-19 through player, blogs and whatnot. And I just was amazed that they were just able to do such an excellent job. Now, you don't seem surprised at all that Disney was able to do that, and that's great. That's amazing. But was there anything that did surprise you about the bubble in general, from the players to coaches to how it went? Was there anything about it that surprised you?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a serious one and a fun one.
Okay.
The serious one is that there were no positive tests. There's only so much you can do to keep a virus out. And with the fact that the Disney cast members Disney lingo for employee, the fact that they were coming and going from the property every single day, there was a worry, right? That something was going to get into the bubble. And some of the cast members, unfortunately, did have positive tests, but just like they are for the regular guests, I'll call them, that are coming and staying at the hotels and going to the theme parks, because Walt Disney World is open, unlike Disneyland in California. There's all sorts of protocols if you're not feeling well. If anything happens, they do temperature checks every day and those kind of things. So they're doing their best to catch things. But that said, I still thought we'd have some form of minor, maybe a mini outbreak, kind of like what we've seen. I mean, those weren't really mini, but Major League Baseball, the NFL, right? They had outbreaks and stuff. But I think when you look at the NBA players, were so committed to, well, not just the players, coaches, staffers, everybody involved, referees, the whole deal, wearing their masks when they were supposed to be, keeping socially distant whenever they could, and those kind of things. You really got a sense of these guys, how seriously they took it. And that part is, that's why they had zero positive tests, because these guys didn't mess around, right? We saw, unfortunately, a couple players broke rules.
Sure.
And they were immediately subject to the long quarantine periods, right? And that was a whole thing. So I think, all around it goes when you have a detailed plan with the level of care that went into it and all those things. Those are that really goes to show you. Sorry, I'm just glancing at my phone. I didn't know something big was happening.
No worries.
It's right. It's NBA off season. You can't not look at your phone.
I get it.
Notifications. But that level of care, thoughtfulness, and detail, when they talked about the playing cards, we're going to be recycled after use and all those things, we all had a chuckle at it, but that shows how much they cared, right? That they really wanted to keep these guys safe and healthy. Now, the fun one that was surprising, these guys, how much they love to fish. That was absolutely stunning. You never expected that. Fortunately, throughout my Disney career, I supported the recreation teams, who are the ones who run the fishing and they run the pools and all that. So I was getting stories from them, and they had to go out and order and buy more fishing poles and fishing gear, because that's how much these guys were wanting to fish. They had to go and buy more bikes, because they all wanted to ride bikes. They wanted to play at the pool. So it was kind of neat to see these guys treated like big kids. But what was also funny with that, though, was you stopped seeing that when the playoffs started. Then they all kind of dialed in, and it was like, it's playoff time. Unless we wrapped up our series early and had a few days off, like it's, it's time to work. So I thought that part was, really interesting too. You saw them really kind of, go into a different mode. There wasn't as much of the, playing outside and doing all those sorts of things as there was, early on. So yeah, we're really cool. But yeah, so that was my fun one, just the fun these guys had, while they were there. Like, a couple of the players told me that, like, man, it was kind of like going to basketball camp, but like basketball camp that didn't end. Like at no point
Yeah.
did you go home at the end of the week. There was, you were just kind of there the whole time. So, and I know how tough that was on the guys. And I know what a relief it was when they got, about halfway through and the families were able to come, and, how that changed things for a lot of the players and things like that. But yeah, it was, again, all the credit in the world to everybody involved with putting this together and pulling it off, because they did an absolutely remarkable job.
Yeah, Disney and the NBA definitely deserve, a round of applause for the job that they did. The players, the staff, everybody, really, they made it work perfectly. And I just wanted to thank you again for coming on here, talking to me about the bubble, talking a little bit about, a Spurs Celtics trade, because I know Spurs fans are always wanted to get into those trade discussions. But before I let you go, I just wanted to give you a little bit of time to shout out anything you're working on and tell people where they can find your work.
Yeah, we've got off-season stuff coming for Yahoo Sports and Real GM, both. Yahoo Sports, some free agency stuff coming there, and things like that. Real GM will be more granular, a little bit deeper on team previews and those kind of things. So some fun stuff coming for those two. And then Celtics Blog, I'm in the middle of a pretty big off-season preview, which is where the trade piece that we discussed earlier came out of. That was one of 8 parts. Just released another part today, all about what the Celtics could do with their mid-level exception. Then we're going to wrap it up with a few more pieces this week, and then that'll go. And then by that point, that'll hopefully have carried us just about time to get into the draft and then the real off season and those kind of things. So I'm super excited for everything's going. It's going to be absolutely insane if the NBA really does the draft on November 18th, and then free agency, right around December 1st, and then games 3 weeks after that. It's just going to be nuts. So this is going to be, a kind of frenzy like we've never really seen before. But, that's just, another thing 2020 is throwing at us, and we'll power right through, the way we do. But, thanks so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I relish the opportunity to talk a little bit of Spurs, because unfortunately it's just, it don't come up all that much. So I was excited to do that as well. So thank you for having me.
You're definitely welcome. And one more thank you for coming on. And everybody who is going to be watching this video, definitely check out everything that Keith is doing on all the outlets that he's working for. He does really great work. And make sure to follow him on Twitter. What is your handle on Twitter?
At Keith Smith NBA is my handle. And then we have a podcast, me and my buddy Trevor Lane from Lakers Nation do it. So yes, a Lakers guy and a Celtics guy. We can get along at least an hour a week, called the NBA Front Office Show, where we talk all about all the transactions and every bit of news that goes on in the NBA, all the way to the G League guys, the two-way guys, all that stuff. We dive deep into all of it. So that's called NBA Front Office Show. You can find that on everywhere you listen to podcasts and those things, and we'll tweet them out and reshare the links and all that stuff when it's out. So yeah, but you can find me specifically at Keith Smith NBA. Forewarning, I tweet a lot, maybe too much for some people.
That's totally fine. We're all glued to our phones anyway, because we've been stuck inside for who knows how many months. But I know I said it earlier, guys. Follow Keith on Twitter. Make sure you're keeping up with his content. Great writer, great reporter. And as always, do not forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button if you want to know when my videos are dropping. And leave me a comment. What did you like? What didn't you like? Is there something that I can improve upon? What do you want to see next time? But until next time, guys, take care.